Welcome back to another episode of Godwin Insights. And we're here again with
Josiah.
and with
Micaiah.
and Micaiah's got the talk timer. He's got it going, so we'll go ahead and get started. We left off last time talking about the characteristics of God and knowing that we were made in God's image. We talked about the things that show God's glory. And just a real quick, fast review. He proclaims when he passes by, when Moses said he wanted to see God's glory, this is what he declares: merciful, gracious, long-suffering, abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. And when you think of the glory of God, I mean, just from a natural perspective, I think of something that's just devouring and almost like a fire. And that makes sense. He was like fire on the mountain. But I don't think of something from a natural perspective. Without reading this, I wouldn't think that this is the embodiment of who God is. So this is quite revolutionary, I think, for me, for my, how I would have imagined it. But we also find that these characteristics are counterculture in whatever time that you live in, whether it's now or 500 years ago and probably 500 years in the future. These are going to be countercultural characteristics. You find people described as being a good person. They'll be trying to be a good person, trying to do good things and not do bad things. Society has always viewed them as a goody-goody and somebody to be shunned, as one that thinks he's better than everybody else, when really he's just trying to be good himself. And true, in man, there's also that tendency towards being prideful.
It's easy to tend to what's easy. It's often harder to follow the example set by God.
It absolutely is. But all these things, being gracious, being long-suffering, also to hold to truth. And culture today, we've gotten so far from even the concept of truth, let alone to follow it. We're now have debates about whether there is a truth, let alone God himself is declaring this as part of this is what makes his glory. He is truth. And of course we see that in Jesus Christ. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Of course he's God. So of course he's going to say that. And I love what you read yesterday, but we're going to move on up to Jesus putting on and demonstrating the characteristics as described by God and of God in the Old Testament. And I think it's important to bring these two together because often the God of the Old Testament is held in contrast with the God of the New Testament, as though there's a difference. And yet we just read the characteristics of God and they were quite wonderful. Mm. And you think, well, that sounds more like what you would say about Jesus Christ, but that's God the Father, God in heaven, that's saying that of himself. My voice is getting a little bit raspy, I feel, coming on. Why don't you read Luke chapter 6, verse 27 to 36. This is Jesus teaching, and he is going to make emphasis on the importance of certain characteristics that are consistent with his own characteristics.
Right. This is starting in Luke 6, chapter 6, verse 27. But I say unto you which hear, love your enemies, do good to them which hate you, bless them that curse you, and pray for them which despitefully use you. And unto him that smiteth thee on the one cheek, offer also the other. And him that taketh away thy cloak, forbid not to take thy coat also. Give to every man that asketh of thee. And of him that taketh away thy goods, ask them not again. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. For if ye love them which love you, what thank have ye? For sinners also love those that love them. And if ye do good to them which do good to you, what thank have ye? For sinners also do even the same. And if ye lend to them of whom ye hope to receive, what thank have ye? For sinners also lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love ye your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping again, and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the thankful and to the evil. Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful.
And there's a lot more to this than what you just read, obviously, prior to it and after it. And also, we could read Matthew 5 and we would see a lot more. But I felt like this section really brought out the emphasis on being long suffering, to bear long, to be forgiven, to be merciful. And I feel like the way that he concludes it, if ever there was any doubt in our minds as to what the end objective is or was, it's made clear in verse 36. It says, "Be ye therefore merciful, as your Father also is merciful." So he's emphasizing a standard which we're going to see bear it out in his life. He demonstrates all these characteristics that he's emphasizing for us to put on. But then he's summing up in verse 36 that these are the characteristics of the Father, and which is consistent with the description that God gave concerning his glory back in Exodus chapter 33 and 34. Did you have any more thoughts on this, Josiah, on those?
No. Well, actually, so could you, well, let me just see here. Verse, this is verse, Luke 6:32. For if you love them which love you, what thank have ye? So, is this essentially saying that you should do good and love without expectation of reward or getting anything back?
Yeah,
That's what I'll take from this.
yeah, that's true, genuine charity, um, which is agape love. It's that love that gives without expectation of receiving, a love that sacrifices for another. And of course, the greatest example of this is Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. What could be given to him? I mean, there was no repayment. He did that all just out of love, which then also we find elsewhere that love is the motivation behind all these things, which is a characteristic that once we demonstrate that, we're demonstrating and putting on the characteristics of God and bearing his image by a characteristic. In Matthew chapter 5 that I mentioned a moment ago in verse 48, it's the same context of the same sermon. He says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." Here again, as your Father, in verse 36 of Luke 6:36, and also Matthew 5:48, the standard is God the Father. Excuse me. So the point being, these things that go counter across grain, different than what we ordinarily would do are things that demonstrate God in us.
What's easiest to do?
The easiest to do is with somebody, tries to get you, is to get them back. If someone punches you in the face,
That's your first reaction.
It's to grab their hand and throw them back against the wall and, do them more than they did you. In fact, the self-defense I agree, is absolutely important, but it's conveying that to be willing to take harm and not give it back is I think the ultimate standard of what they're doing, what he's getting at here is just quite amazing. It's not at all what we would do. Go to Colossians chapter 3 and we hear what the Apostle Paul says in regards to putting on these characteristics. We have the example of God the Father, the holy God of heaven, the God Jehovah, which Jesus is Jehovah as well, and so is the Holy Ghost is also Jehovah. But anyway, we're talking about God the Father when he was demonstrating his glory and his holiness. He expressed things that were embodied in the life of Jesus Christ, and he taught in his message to us the importance of putting on these characteristics. And now the Apostle Paul is going to be talking about that. Colossians 3 and verse 10 through 16.
And have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. Where there is
after the image of him that created him. Notice that. I'm sorry, I had to.
Yes. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian.
I've heard that, or Scythian.
Bond nor free, but Christ is all and in all. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another and forgiving one another. If any man have a quarrel against any, even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. And above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness, and let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also ye are called in one body, and be ye thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord.
And I love in verse 14, it says, and above all things put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. And we find Jesus, when he was teaching himself, was saying that love is the fulfillment of the whole, all the commandments. And by that, it was first and foremost love for God, God in heaven, to love thy God with all thy heart, with all soul, with all thy mind, with all thy strength. He says in the second is like unto it, to love thy neighbor as thyself. So love, he says here, is the bond of perfectness. You want to do right. You put on the charity right here.
So when he says in Matthew 5:48, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect, he's saying to exercise charity.
I'm going to say yes. There's the idea of the perfectness is to be full grown, but I think it's as much that as it is what you just brought out right there. We have the bond of perfectness, and then the other reference where you just read there, when it says be perfect, the bond of perfectness is charity. That was excellent. Kind of where we were going, but I like how you got there first. Anyway, that's our timer, and we have more that we could have talked about.
Before we close, I want to say something.
Yes.
How do I say this? Try to imagine what the world would be like if these were not attributes and qualities of God. If he was not gracious, if he was not merciful, and good, and all these wonderful things we read. try to imagine
Wow.
how it would be if that was not the case.
Wow. What a doleful thought that is. That's also profound. Anyway, I think that's a really good place to end on. What would that be like? And aren't we thankful that God does have these attributes and characteristics? But if he didn't, oh, the wrath that must have been poured, or either that, or to think that we would be on our own, or No, I'm impressed. That's a really good thought. We'll end on that. Just would love to keep on going what we can. Till next time, stand for the truth.